presented by Joe Biden, said he was vice president when the deadly high school shooting in Parkland, Florida, took place, Bloomberg reported. Charlie Niebergel AP photo driving the day. The Biden narrative, Bloomberg. Biden misstates 2018 Parkland shooting in his latest blunder, by Emma Kinery. Joe Biden said he was vice president when the deadly high school shooting in Parkland, Florida, took place, except, it happened in 2018, more than a year after he left office, the latest gaffe by the Democratic presidential frontrunner. Biden told reporters in Iowa on Saturday that those kids in Parkland came up to see me when I was vice president. But when they visited Capitol Hill to talk with members of Congress, lawmakers were basically cowering, not wanting to see them. They did not want to face it on camera, an official with the Biden campaign said. The former vice president was thinking of the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, when he misspoke. That attack, in which 20 children between 6 and 7 years old were killed along with 6 staff members, was in December 2012. Bloomberg. Natasha Koretsky and Mark Caputo, with Abuna, Iowa. Dateline. Biden mangles his words, and undercuts his message. The gaffes are back. From mangling a favorite one-liner to almost suggesting that poor kids aren't white to flubbing his campaign's text message address on the debate stage last week, Joe Biden's propensity for verbal missteps burst into view after he mostly kept it in check for the first 3 months of his candidacy. It reflects an ongoing difficulty for Biden. His gaffes inevitably draw outsized attention, overshadowing his message and, at times, the depth and versatility of his remarks. Biden's headline-grabbing comment about poor kids was at a marathon, 2-hour event addressing the Asian Latino coalition, where he took questions and then delivered lengthy answers, at times delving deep into policy. Politico Depth Angst, Coned, WAPO's advisor in Des Moines. Democrats descend on Iowa, with renewed anxiety, as Democrats descend on Iowa, kick off a 6-month sprint to the first primary vote. Party activists are increasingly anxious that former Vice President Joe Biden, the consistent polling leader, has not disposed of persistent questions about whether he is well equipped to take on President Trump. Adding to the Democrats' nervousness is that a clear alternative has yet to emerge. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Mass., is rising in the polls and has a high-quality campaign organization, but doubts linger in some quarters about the appeal of her left-leaning policies in a general election. Senators Kamala D. Harris, California, and Bernie Sanders, Vermont, are struggling to maintain momentum, while pressure is growing from frustrated voters for many of the weaker candidates to drop out. That shaky landscape is prolonging the uncertainty in a nominating contest that Democrats describe as the most important of their lifetimes, and it puts the party in the unusual situation of having a leader who draws on a deep well of affection but also gives a lot of people in the party jitters. Joe Biden can resonate with the working-class voters that Trump fooled in the last go-around, and that's what we need. He's close to the middle. He's a known quantity. He appeals to middle-class voters, said Alan Fierer, the party chairman in Madison County, but boy, he's old, Fierer added. That shouldn't be a problem, and you don't like to say it, but he isn't as compelling verbally. There is starting to be a real fear that he cannot hold his own in the debate against Donald Trump. WAPO Boston Globe's Jess Bidgood in Clear Lake, Iowa. Elizabeth Warren circles in Iowa as Joe Biden stumbles if Trump were to debate Warren, said Steve Epperly, 74, I think he would be wrestling a tiger there. She's got all her ducks in a row. She knows how to express herself. She doesn't have to get real wordy about it, Epperly said, adding that Biden kind of floats off once in a while. Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Pittsburgh area Dem donors prefer Sanders. Bernie has big lead, with Warren in second place. Bloomberg on Biden. From CBS Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. Brennan, do you think Joe Biden is a lock for the nomination? Bloomberg, no, I think, and Joe would certainly tell you that he's not a lock for the nomination. There are 20 candidates, of which, the majority of them have a really legitimate chance. And Joe's got a great experience. He's a great American who's worked very hard for the country, but there are lots of others who you can say exactly the same thing about. And Joe's gonna have to go out there and earn his spurs, as they say, and he's going to have to face every issue. Politico Playbook newsletter. Sign up today to receive the #1 rated newsletter in politics. By signing up, you agree to receive email newsletters or alerts from Politico. You can unsubscribe at any time. Good Sunday morning. Sneak peek, week ahead, the president is in Bedminster, New Jersey. He has a few events scheduled. Tuesday, President Trump will tour Shell Pennsylvania Petrochemicals Complex in Monaca, Pennsylvania. He will also speak there. Thursday, Trump will speak at a political rally in Manchester. N.H. What America is reading, quite a front page for Kyrsten Sinema, Arizona Republic. Sinema sidesteps chaos and drama. In her first 6 months, Arizona senator is living up to her centrist reputation. WAPO special gun violence section, the lives lost, the cover, the names of those who died in gun violence at Dayton Daily News front page. #Dayton Strong is tested. Epstein's death. Jeffrey Epstein was, perhaps, the highest-profile prisoner in America, and his death is already becoming a hot-button political issue. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have called for investigations, and the DOJ, IG, FBI and New York Medical Examiner's Office have all opened probes. #tip, WAPO. The president retweeted a conspiracy theory that suggested the Clintons were involved in Epstein's death. Jake Tapper spoke to Beto O'Rourke on CNN's State of the Union. This is another example of our president using this position of public trust to attack his political enemies with unfounded conspiracy theories, and also to try to force you and me and all of us to focus on his bizarre behavior instead of the fact that we just lost 22 people in this community, 9 people in Dayton, Ohio. John Harris, Epstein death brings birth of mainstream conspiracy theories. Jeffrey Epstein, his perversions, and the perversions of justice swirling around his case, has lived for years on the margins of politics because of his association with 2 presidents, Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, among others in a long roster of people with respectable titles who spent time in his disreputable orbit. Epstein's death by what authorities called suicide in a Manhattan jail cell Saturday morning moved his case to the center of American politics. One of the creepiest figures ever to vault to notoriety in modern culture is gone. But the convicted sex offender's resonance as an emblem of the dark side of national character, a stimulant of suspicion, contempt, and paranoia, in addition to plain nausea, likely will last longer and with more intensity than if he had lived. At a minimum, the Epstein death is now political even if one takes the details at face value. How was the person who, at the moment was arguably the most prominent defendant awaiting trial in the world, who had already apparently attempted suicide a couple weeks earlier, able to take his life at a federal detention center? And who will be held accountable for the lapse? More profoundly, the Epstein matter is now thoroughly political because many influential people are unable to take the details at face value. Indeed, they think it is simply naive to do so. Politico. A message from SoftBank. America is where the world's innovation happens, and SoftBank is helping that innovation come to life. Here in the US, we're investing in people, companies and transformational technology that is reshaping the future and improving people's lives. Learn more about SoftBank's investment in the US, and watch our new video at politico.com/sponsor-content/SoftBank. Kellyanne Conway to Bill Hemmer on Fox News Sunday. This seems to be very concrete, in that Jeffrey Epstein has done some very bad things over a number of years, and so let's continue to investigate that. I don't think that somebody's crimes and the accountability for that necessarily perishes with them. Miami Herald front page, banner headline, "The Easy Way Out, New York Post, former MCC inmate, there's no way Jeffrey Epstein killed himself." Bruce Golding and Brad Hamilton spoke to a former inmate, who they helped write this first-person account. "There's no way that man could have killed himself. I've done too much time in those units. It's an impossibility. Between the floor and the ceiling is like 8 or 9 feet. There's no way for you to connect to anything. You have sheets, but they're paper level, not strong enough." He was 200 pounds, it would never happen. They don't give you enough in there that could successfully create an instrument of death. You want to write a letter, they give you rubber pens and maybe once a week a piece of paper. Nothing hard or made of metal, and there's a cop at the door about every 9 minutes, whether you're on suicide watch or not. And why? Posted Preet Bharara, there should be, and almost certainly is, video of Epstein's suicide at MCC. One hopes it is complete, conclusive, and secured. Neetsa Lee Watkins, why wasn't Jeffrey Epstein on suicide watch when he died? After an apparent attempt 3 weeks ago, Jeffrey Epstein, the financier who was at the facility, awaiting trial on charges he sexually abused dozens of girls, was placed on suicide watch and received daily psychiatric evaluations, a person familiar with his detention said. But just 6 days later, on July 29, Mr. Epstein, 66, was taken off the watch for reasons that remained unclear on Saturday, the person said. 12 days after that, he hanged himself. Guards making their morning rounds discovered his body at 6:30 a.m. on Saturday, the Bureau of Prisons said. Mr. Epstein's suicide, coming shortly after prison officials in Manhattan deemed he was no longer at risk of taking his own life, raises questions about the steps prison officials took to keep him alive and ensure he would face his accusers in court. It would have been extremely difficult for Mr. Epstein to harm himself had he still been on suicide watch, a second prison official said, also speaking on the condition of anonymity for fear of dismissal. NETWAPO's Matt Zapotowski, Devlin Barrett, Renee Merle and Carol Lenig, people close to Epstein, noting that he seemed recently to be in good spirits, were surprised by reports of suicide, according to one person familiar with their discussions Saturday, and expressed concern about the possibility of foul play. His attorneys are seeking to learn from authorities how Epstein's body was found and how such an incident could have happened, this person said. WAPO needs Joe Becker in Rinkeby, Sweden, the global machine behind the rise of far-right nationalism. Sweden was long seen as a progressive utopia. Then came waves of immigrants, and the forces of populism at home and abroad. Nativist rhetoric, that immigrants are invading the homeland, has gained ever greater traction, and political acceptance, across the West amid dislocations wrought by vast waves of migration from the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. In its most extreme form, it is echoed in the online manifesto of the man accused of gunning down 22 people last weekend in El Paso. In the nationalists' message-making, Sweden has become a prime cautionary tale, dripping with schadenfreude. What is even more striking is how many people in Sweden, progressive, egalitarian, welcoming Sweden, seem to be warming to the nationalists' view, that immigration has brought crime, chaos and a fraying of the cherished social safety net, not to mention a withering away of national culture and tradition. Fueled by an immigration backlash, Sweden has accepted more refugees per capita than any other European country. Right-wing populism has taken hold, reflected most prominently in the steady ascent of a political party with neo-Nazi roots, the Sweden Democrats. In elections last year, they captured nearly 18% of the vote. To dig beneath the surface of what is happening in Sweden, though, is to uncover the workings of an international disinformation machine, devoted to the cultivation, provocation and amplification of far-right, anti-immigrant passions and political forces. Indeed, that machine, most influentially rooted in Vladimir V. Putin's Russia and the American far-right, underscores a fundamental irony of this political moment, the globalization of nationalism. Neat.a, Times, FBI struggles to confront right-wing terrorism, by Del Quentin Wilbur, FBI Director Christopher A. Wray assured Congress last month that his agents were aggressively combating domestic terror threats from a broad array of extremist groups. The FBI, working with our state and local law enforcement partners, he said, is all over this. But the Bureau is now scrambling to investigate domestic terrorism on two fronts, a mass shooting in Gilroy, California, followed days later by a far more deadly attack in El Paso, appearing to undercut Wray's assertions and raise questions about whether the FBI is doing enough to identify and stop murderous plots by homegrown fanatics with no ties to foreign terrorist organizations. Some former law enforcement officials and Democratic lawmakers contend federal agencies have been caught flat-footed by a surge in mass shootings by white supremacists and other extremists targeting minorities, immigrants and religious groups. Lotta message from SoftBank, we're on track to invest $50 billion in U.S. companies by the end of 2020. Learn more about SoftBank's investment in the U.S. at politico.com/sponsor content/SoftBank. West Wing reading. New fence replaces decades-old border wall in San Diego. By LA Times. Gustavo Solis in San Diego. Sunday. Best, Acting DHS Secretary Kevin McAleenan to Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press. Todd, I want to go back to the Mississippi raid one more time on this. Given the emotions of the country right now, in hindsight, do you wish this raid didn't happen this week? McAleenan, the timing was unfortunate. Not running for president, but... Margaret Brennan spoke with Mike Bloomberg on CBS Face the Nation. Brennan, well I want to ask you about some of the choices the candidates are making. Joe Biden has said the president encourages white supremacism. Bernie Sanders said the president's a racist. Elizabeth Warren said he's stirring up racial conflict. Beto O'Rourke said he is making the risk of violence like this in El Paso more real. Do you think that it's a mistake for Democrats to tie the president's rhetoric to these mass killings? Bloomberg, no, I think words matter. I was mayor of the largest city in America for 12 years, my words mattered. The papers every day said repeated what I said and tried to put it in context and tried to ascribe motives to everything I said. The public reads, watches, listens to that, and that changes their behavior. People look to their leadership for guidance, and to say that it doesn't have an effect is wrong. So what the president says is very important, and if he supports or says nice things about racists, it encourages racism. If he goes and says nice things about white supremacists, he encourages that kind of violence. I hope he understands this. He cannot go and just shoot off his mouth and say anything. He's the President of the United States, and he's not elected to run the Democrat to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. He's elected to run America, the American government, and he's got to represent everybody whether he agrees with them or not. Flawed census? Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat, California, to Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press. We have the census coming up, okay? The 2020 census is coming up. We do this census every 10 years in America, and which is that we count who's here. So, and we make decisions about everything from electoral lines to where we're going to put resources. So, we have a lot of blended families in America, which is households of, multi-generational households, including people who are documented and undocumented. When that census taker comes knocking at that door, they're not going to answer the door. And I know this administration knows that. We conduct a census as part of an extension of who we are as a democracy. We say, every person matters. We count. We make decisions based on who's here and what they need. And you and I will both suffer if that census count is flawed. And I'm telling you that, given the policies of this administration, that is going to be a flawed census. The Scaramucci/Trump breakup. At Real Donald Trump at 10:47 p.m. Anthony Scaramucci, who was quickly terminated, 11 days, from a position that he was totally incapable of handling, now seems to do nothing but television as the all-time expert on President Trump. Like many other so-called television experts, he knows very little about me, other than the fact that this administration has probably done more than any other administration in its first 2.5 years of existence. Anthony, who would do anything to come back in, should remember the only reason he is on TV, and it's not for being the mooch. At Scaramucci, for the last 3 years I have fully supported this president. Recently he has said things that divide the country in a way that is unacceptable. So I didn't pass the 100% litmus test. Eventually he turns on everyone, and soon it will be you and then the entire country. Playbook reads photo du jour, faithful release balloons during a mass for peace, in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, that marked the 1-week anniversary of a shooting that killed 22 at a Walmart in El Paso. Christian Chavez, AP Photo LA. Times, Cuba feels the pinch of the Trump administration's travel restrictions, by Mimi Whitefield in Havana. Message from SoftBank. Learn more about SoftBank's investment in the U.S., and watch our new video at politico.com/sponsor-content/softbank. Bonus Great Weekend Reads, curated by Daniel Lippman, at Lippman, filing from Porto, Portugal. A cold case team is searching for who betrayed Anne Frank, by Sydney Combs in National Geographic. 75 years after her arrest, investigators are still exploring how the Nazis discovered the Dutch teen and her family. Nat Geo: Is it possible to stop a mass shooting before it happens? By Andrea Stanley in Cosmopolitan. You've never heard of her, but somewhere in America, a top-secret investigator known as the Savant is infiltrating online hate groups to take down the most violent men in the country. Cosmopolitan goes undercover as she races to get ahead of the next large-scale attack. Cosmo: Elizabeth Warren's Classroom Strategy. By Rebecca Traister in The Cut. A lifelong teacher, she's the most professorial presidential candidate ever. What does America want to be taught? The Cut: The Beautiful Power of Ta-Nehisi Coates. By Jesmyn Ward in Vanity Fair. With his groundbreaking non-fiction works, Ta-Nehisi Coates emerged as our most vital public intellectual. Now, his debut novel, The Water Dancer, takes him to uncharted depths. VF, $19.60 on Amazon, HTLongreads.com. Excerpt from The Great Successor, The Divinely Perfect Destiny of Brilliant Comrade Kim Jong-un by Anna Fifield. Sinocism, General Hyun-Yong Chol, who was the North Korea's equivalent of a defense minister, vanished at the start of 2016 and was reported to have been executed for insubordination and treason. Among his many alleged transgressions, according to South Korea's intelligence agency, was falling asleep while Kim Jong-un was speaking. But he was not quietly eradicated. He was publicly executed by anti-aircraft guns, a method that would have blown him to a pulp. Other officials would certainly have made a mental note to stay wide awake in meetings from then on. Sinocism: The Lies of the Irishman, by Bill Turnelli in Slate. Netflix and Martin Scorsese are making their biggest bets ever on the confessions of a mafia hitman. The guy made it all up. Slate. The trailer: The End Times Are Here, and I Am a Target, by Hayes Brown in the outline. You, me, the other New Yorkers shuffling through the Target around me, are somehow not stockpiling non-perishables and fleeing the coasts in search of high ground ahead of the looming end like you'd expect in a proper end times. Instead, we're just trying to get through the next day or week as we suffer through the early throes of our collective demise, hoping that we might be wrong about the whole thing. The outline, htthebrowser.com, Athleisure, Bar and KL, The Tyranny of the Ideal Woman, by Gia Tolentino. In an excerpt of Trick Mirror, Reflections of Self-Delusion, in The Guardian, How We Became Suckers for the Hard Labor of Self-Optimization. The Guardian, $16.20 on Amazon. The surreal story of a Trump-loving artist's war with the Smithsonian. By Washingtonian's Ben Wofford, a New York painter created a sprawling tribute to the president, took it on a roadshow across red state America, and became a conservative celeb along the way. What he wanted most was a showing at the National Portrait Gallery. Then its director turned him away. Washingtonian: The U.S. abandoned Iraq. Don't Repeat History in Afghanistan, by David Petraeus and Vance Sertuk in The Wall Street Journal. In Afghanistan, the Taliban are far from defeated, while some 20 foreign terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS retain a presence in the region. The Taliban have clearly indicated what they will try to do once U.S. forces are gone: overthrow the Afghan government and reimpose medieval rule. Wall Street Journal: You Can't Recover If You're Dead, by Kate Nibbs in The Ringer. Drug overdoses are killing Americans in staggering numbers. Overdose prevention spaces have been saving lives for years in Europe, Australia, and Canada. Will they, or can they, ever be accepted in the United States? The Ringer, HTLongreads.com. Dying the Christian Science Way, The Horror of My Father's Last Days, by Caroline Fraser in The Guardian. Per thebrowser.com's description, Christian Science is disappearing. The churches are closing. Barely 1,000 practitioners still offer their services. By denying the reality of illness and preaching against the use of medicine, the church has caused untold suffering to believers and, less forgivably, to their children. Religious exemptions have sheltered Christian scientists from prosecution for child neglect, and allowed them to opt out of public health programs. The Guardian Playbookers sent tips to Eli Oken and Garrett Ross at Politico Playbook at Politico.com. Weekend Weddings, David Cockle, a 2016 campaign strategist for Jeb Bush, married Marissa Tank on Saturday in an outdoor ceremony near his favorite snowboard run in Beaver Creek, Colorado. Rob Stutzman, a longtime California GOP political hand, officiated the ceremony. Spotted: Kent Luckin, Sarah Craig, Sandra Conlon, Dodd Harris, and Yev Ogstums, Tim Miller, Ann Compton, Jeff Cellini, Jonathan Martin, and Betsy Fisher Martin, Jennifer Jacobs, Sarah Isker, Matt Strawn, Robert House, Huff Cooksey, Ryan Koopmans, and Declan Garvey. Luckin, the best man, read telegrams from Bush. Remember, there are two secrets to a long-lasting marriage: a good sense of humor and a short memory. And, Mitt Romney, I credit David for my big win in the 2012 Iowa caucus. Oh, wait, the recount had us losing 2 weeks later. David and Marissa, your relationship was tested in the most difficult of circumstances. Two Romney campaigns, Kelsey Moran, Andrew Okuyiga, Vianid, the bride, 30, is the chief of staff to Representative Lois Frankel, Democrat of Florida, and works in Washington. The bride graduated from Indiana University. The groom, 31, is a public policy manager and a lobbyist in Washington for Amazon. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard. The couple met in 2011 while playing kickball in an adult social sports league in Washington. With a pic, Nichinai Huang, Rami Inocencio Jr., Vianid, Mr. Shinai Huang, 28, a classical pianist in New York City, is an adjunct professor at the Aaron Copland School of Music, Queens College. Graduated from Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, and received a Master of Music degree from Mann's College of Music in Manhattan. Mr. Inocencio, 42, who is based in Beijing, is the Asia correspondent for CBS News. He served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Sichuan, China, from 2000 to 2002. He graduated from the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. With a pic, Meet Molly Johnson, Paul Ballmer, Vianid, Ms. Johnson, 29, is an assistant and program associate for Meadow Fund, a philanthropic organization based in Santa Barbara, California, that focuses on serving vulnerable demographics and criminal justice reform. Mr. Ballmer, also 29, is a third-year law student at the University of California, Berkeley. Until 2017, Mr. Ballmer worked as a legislative and campaign aide for Representative Earl Blumenauer, Democrat of Oregon. With a pic, Meet Welcome to the World, Kelsey Setti, an account manager at DKC, and Niket Setti, a small business owner. Welcome Dasher Setti. Pic birth week was Wednesday. Tom McCluskey, VP of Government Affairs at March for Life, H.T. Matil Thibault birthdays, Rep. Dan Kildee, Democrat Michigan, is 61, H.T. Mitchell Rivard, Rep. Billy Long, RMO, is 64, Matt Morgan, Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Cause to the VP, David Brooks is 58, David Rubenstein is 7-0. Charles Blow is 49, Rob O'Donnell, founder of 38 Paces, Politico's Toby Eckert and Michael Roberts. Jim Wilkinson, Chairman and CEO of Trail Runner International, Pamela Lynn Sorensen. Chris Berry, SVP at iHeartMedia, Vice's